before I knew anything about Queen Mother Moore, I had been using the term injected oppression. And so when I sat with and heard her talk about oppression psychoneurosis, and then I sat with this particular clip where she talked about the loneliness she felt, I felt readily seen. Oftentimes when I would try to talk about the need to expand the education in mental health care, and likely for yourself, if you are a visionary in your field, you know what it can be like to feel alone. This is the Return to Presence podcast, where we sit at the feet of Black women, past and present. I'm talking trailblazers, quiet disruptors, and everyday revolutionaries. Through their oral histories, our ancestors and elders left us a blueprint for healing, leading, and living with intention. I'm Dr. Shawna Murray Brown, a cultural historian, psychotherapist, and liberatory strategist, here to help us uncover their lessons and carry their wisdom forward. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, Dr. Shawna in the His House, and welcome to episode 3 of the Return to Presence podcast. Now, we have been really journeying with the depths of the reality of what it can mean to be a Black woman in leadership. And while these elders have been giving us insight around the importance of caring for ourselves, we've gotten insight on the importance of sitting at the feet of our elders. Today's episode will invite us to consider the ways that we might not feel really understood. That in the ways that we might be moving through the world with droves behind us, carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, but still somehow feeling alone. And that is why I am so excited to introduce Queen Mother Moore, also known as Mrs. Audley Moore. Audley Queen Mother Moore was born in 1898, y'all, in New Iberia, Louisiana, to Ella Henry and St. Cyr Moore, and was the eldest of 3. By the age of 5, Audley and her sister were sent off to live with multiple family members following her mother's death. She lived with her grandmother and then with her father for some time until he unfortunately died. This left 4th grade Audley to fend for herself, dropping out of school to care for her siblings. To get the funds to rent a home for them, she sold mules that were previously used in her deceased father's business. She even started hairdressing to gain the skill to produce more income, even though she had to lie about her age in order to do so. Young Audley and her sisters became activists against the racial prejudice they saw and to which they were subjected. In her oral history, reflections about mobilizing local neighbors to demand that the Red Cross serve Black soldiers and the impact this had on their political perspective are shared. Audley Moore articulated a chief focus of her work to support African American people to regain their quote-unquote right minds, one where they could identify the oppressive practices and the ways that their identity of quote Negro should be shifted to one that is African and acknowledging of their African heritage. This is what she felt, y'all. She wasn't playing. She learned of these ideals from Marcus Garvey, an inspiration to her later work as the founder of the African American Cultural Foundation. Queen Mother Moore expressed that she and her husband had an interest to move to a place free from discrimination and segregation, but were unable to move to Africa due to their own familial concerns. Queen Mother Moore joined the Communist Party in 1930, and while a member, advocated for Black players to play in the major baseball leagues and for the interruption of segregation in the Coast Guard. She later found that the Communist Party did not share her passion for racial justice and that the leaders held prejudiced ideals, and so she left the party in 1950. Queen Mother Moore was ordained in many religious institutions and noted the value of Christianity in uniting Black folks to advocate for change in the criminal justice system. She was working to prevent the execution of Black men who were incarcerated and successfully organized to reverse legislation that would have led families to lose access to welfare resources. In 1962, Queen Mother Moore organized and became the president of the Reparations Committee of Descendants of U.S. Slaves Incorporated, where she traveled across the country educating Black folks about reparations and submitted a claim for reparations with the United States government. Queen Mother Moore established a research institute and College of African Studies on land that she and her sister acquired in Parksville, New York. Their intention was to treat oppression psychoneurosis and to support folks from all over the world in their decolonization journey. Unfortunately, that building burned down in 1978, and at the time of the interview, Queen Mother Moore was raising funds to rebuild. Now, what we'll hear as we delve into these insights around her experiences of loneliness, her journey, and some self-consciousness that she felt around the fact that she dropped out of school in the 4th grade. What we'll contend with and commune with is while she was an amazing community organizer and she was transforming lives, that she was really interested in accessing the upper echelon of Black folks during her time. And so I'm really excited to hold the space for us to consider the ways that we might be able to connect with her story. Let's take a listen.
The reason I left because I was beginning to be aware. My awareness started really in a big way in 1945. But I went to the communist leaders and they couldn't touch it. As a matter of fact, they began to look upon me as an enemy. Because you're not supposed to think out of their realms, you understand? So I resigned. I recognized the coldness and aloofness and everything, here I was searching. And that was no good for them. So it was hard. It was hard. So I went to everybody I knew that had a mind to talk about us. I went to Du Bois, I went to Walter White, I went to Miss Bethune, I went everywhere. They told me somebody had a mind, honey, to talk about us. Searching, and it was hard because, I wasn't on nobody's payroll. Yeah. It was a question of doing this, just trying to find myself. So, what you wanted to say?
Oh, I was asking, you said you went and talked to Du Bois?
I talked to Du Bois, I talked to Walter White, I talked to Miss Bethune, I talked to Sally Stewart, I talked to, let's see, others, but everybody that had education. I thought people who had education should know. So if they told me somebody had some learning, I'd go to them,
What do you remember most about Du Bois?
Well, that's what I remember most about him, me sitting there and he not understanding the thing I said. I remember that more than anything else. The search for our identity. He didn't help me. Du Bois did not help me with our identity. And neither did he think that was too important. And that really turned me off. I couldn't believe it, but there it was,
And then Walter White, it was the same thing?
The same thing with everybody. Reynolds of the Elks, great leader of the Elks. If they told me somebody was head of the Masons, I'd go try to. Everybody I'd go try to see who I could see, who would see me.
Do you remember Mary McLeod Bethune particularly?
Yeah, I remember her. I went to Washington to meet with her.
You went all the way to Washington?
I went all the way to Washington, sit down in her office, and met with her. And she told me if she had 10 women like me, she said I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't go through the back door no more if I had 10 like you. That's what Mary McLeod Bethune told me. If I had 10 women like you, she said I wouldn't go through no back doors no more. That's what she told me. She made me give a speech to the women. I was one of the women who were there when she formed the National Council of Negro Women.
At that Y in New York?
No, that was in Washington.
Washington.
And I became a life member in Washington of the Council of Negro Women. But Mary McLeod Bethune made me give a speech on Howard University lawn to those women. I said, Miss Bethune, I've never been to school. I can't talk to those women. They're professors and doctors and intellectuals. You know, that's who she had, all the high echelon of black women in her movement. And I can't. She said, get out there, I said. She said, you got more in your little finger than they got in their whole hand. She said, you get out there and talk to them women. They need what you got to say. Now, that's what she did. She made me get out there. Well, somebody else, Dr. Lawrence C. Reddick, he was the first one who made me make a speech. I'd been speaking on the street ladders because none of the churches would let us in with our kind of talk. They didn't want to hear no freedom talk. Now, this wasn't nationalist talk, mind you. This was all that integrationist talk that the communists were doing long before any Martin Luther King. Communists started all that integration stuff. Well, but no church would have it. So we had to put up ladders and speak on the street corner. That's where I got my PhD, on the street corner, speaking, you see. So Dr. Reddick, Lawrence Reddick, he's at Harvard now. He's a Harvard professor. And he got a hold of me one day. He said, I'm having a meeting at the YMCA. Well, at that time, the YMCA represented the black intellect, you know. It wasn't for the little people. And I'm not having an education. I was always over-conscious of my lack of learning, that I didn't belong with those people who had learning, you know. So he said, I want you to come to my conference I'm having. I want you to give a talk. Oh, Dr. Reddick, not me. I haven't been to school. I said, my grammar's bad, everything. He said, I want you just like you are. Don't change a thing. I want you to come. When he said, don't change a thing, it sort of gave me a little confidence, you know.
Right.
Well, anyway, he put me up on the stage, and that was my first stage.
Every time I listen to Queen Mother Moore, I feel a wide range of emotion. In this clip, she shares a wide range of her own personal experience. You hear her talking about going to the people with the education, the upper echelon of black folks, and that she went wherever somebody had a mind, wherever someone had some thinking about them. And she's sharing that she had been studying what it means to be of African descent. And that when she went to those that had been essentially indoctrinated in the educational systems, those that had went to Howard University and had been able to make a name for themselves, that they didn't understand what she was talking about. They were not interested in studying or conversing about these notions and concepts of freedom. And you heard that right. She said she went and talked to Du Bois. She said she went and sat in the office of Mary McLeod Bethune, names that we often reference when we're talking about African American history. But oftentimes we don't consider how our acquisition of education, no matter where we are, serves as a separation from the grassroots movement and change that we'd like to be able to see in our communities. Queen Mother Moore, in other aspects of her oral history, talks about her perspective that Black folks were struggling with this concept that she called oppression psychoneurosis. And oppression psychoneurosis, essentially, in her words, was the idea that Black folks were, African folks in America, were seeking to fashion themselves the way that the white man did, to dress like the white man, to speak like the white man. And that she felt that that was disconnecting us from our essence, that was disconnecting us from our collective, that was disconnecting us from our community. And she felt that, later on in her life, she establishes a college of African studies in New York. And at the time of the interview, she was trying to raise more money for her to be able to rebuild because her school had been burned down. She wanted to establish relationships with psychotherapists and psychiatrists at Howard because she really felt that if we were going to provide appropriate mental health care to Black people, that we had to treat this infatuation with being like white people, and that we had to reposition our focus to what it means to connect to our own lineage and own wisdoms. And when I think about this, if you know me beyond this podcast, then you know that I've spent the last 15 years training psychotherapists, over 700 today, across the country around what it means to decolonize therapy for Black folks. And that I was super afraid to talk about how the present systems and medical health systems are largely failing Black people in the therapeutic realm, not only children, but also adults and our elders. And present day, before I knew anything about Queen Mother Moore, I had been using the term injected oppression. And so when I sat with and heard her talk about oppression psychoneurosis, and then I sat with this particular clip where she talked about the loneliness she felt, I felt readily seen. Oftentimes when I would try to talk about the need to expand the education in mental health care, and likely for yourself, if you are a visionary in your field, you know what it can be like to feel alone and to be afraid. I certainly was afraid that when I started to train folks around, the complexities of African American mental health and how racism and oppression impacts us, and the ways in which we need to establish solidarity of folks of color and those indigenous to this land, people were looking at me like I was crazy. And I was concerned that maybe I would lose my license. Now, in this current political environment, that actually could be more close to the truth. But at the time that I was thinking about it, I was also isolating myself. We also hear Queen Mother Moore talk about her feeling a semblance of what we might call today imposter syndrome, which I actually believe isn't a real thing. I believe that we created in our minds. And this clip of Queen Mother Moore talking about Mary McLeod Bethune, inviting her to the university and putting her on a stage and letting her know that she had more in her finger than the women in the room with PhDs had in their whole hand. I think that that's something important for us to remember. How often do you find yourself isolating yourself for fear that others won't understand you? How often do you actually maybe dismiss your radical thoughts and your visionary pathways because you have to have the courage to be able to stand alone? Queen Mother Moore is absolutely that for me. Now, as you consider all that I've shared about my own experience contending with this notion of loneliness and fear, and what it can mean when the pressures of society push us away from what we know to be true, I want to pose a question for you. What happens when we allow the limits of today to inform or define what we feel is actually possible? How do we hold on to a vision that others can't quite see yet? I often differentiate the term freedom from liberation. I say that freedom is individual and liberation is collective. Now, while Queen Mother Moore is talking about freedom talk, you know? She's talking about how the churches at the time wouldn't allow freedom talk, but that they would allow the concepts and conversations of integrationist talk, that anything that was inviting Black folks or people of African descent to stand on their own 2 feet and to reclaim what is theirs, it was shunned. Now, what might that be for you? Can you think of a time where you had a radical idea and then you were moved to dismiss it? Because truly what we're sitting with is, what is Queen Mother Moore inviting us to consider? How do we stay rooted in what we know to be true? How do we reimagine Black leadership beyond capitalism, beyond the status quo, beyond the notions of whiteness? Where in your life have you felt isolated because of your vision? And what could you do today to begin to more intentionally seek community so that you don't find yourself doing that negative self-talk that Queen Mother Moore was grounding in? And how can we establish a semblance of siblinghood or sisterhood, right? Can we be the kind of person that shatters all of the negative self-talk and pulls a person up to be their greatest self? Now it's time for the presence practice, where I share what rose up in me and what it might mean for how we live today. So y'all, I was looking back on what we recorded and I was like, man, I need to give more of myself and really even be more vulnerable about my relationship with feeling like a unicorn of sorts and really valuing this opportunity for connection, having people speak your name in spaces and places and believe in you, to support the healing of this notion, this concept of imposter syndrome. And so, yeah, I'm saying we took a second time to add this in because I thought it was super important. And so when I think about, the kind of vibes that Queen Mother Moore shares as she's speaking about folks paving a way for her, giving her an opportunity to be able to connect with folks at Howard, even though she didn't have all the fancy credentials. While I have all the A, B, C, D, E, F, Gs, when I think about my own experience, it makes me remember when I was out of, working at DSS. I had left that role. I, was really trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself, but I really didn't feel like I fit in any place. Like I felt like I was called for something bigger, something more transformational. But there weren't many folks that I felt like I could go to as a guide. There weren't many folks that I felt like really could see and feel my vibes and like all that I was excited to become. And I remember, like, I really wanted a mentor, y'all. I really wanted somebody to see me. I was seeking out elders of sorts, not olders, okay? Because now, we're going to take this pause for me to say that olders are people who age and they are who they are. Elders are folks that take on the responsibility of pouring in so seriously. And they take it so seriously that when they meet you and they see you, they really see you. They truly invest. And I had an experience like that. There was this woman, I saw her speaking at a conference, and she was so fly. She was like the only Black woman speaking at this very, very white conference, and it was around addiction. And you might know her. Her name is Dr. Sabrina Njai. And I know how Dr. Sabrina was going to be in my life. I didn't know she was about to be my therapist. I didn't know if she was about to be, I didn't know what she was going to be. But I knew in my mind that based off of the way that she was showing up, I really felt like I needed that kind of insight. And so years passed after I met her the first time. I remember I met her at a conference while a MSW student. And then later, I started getting her emails. And she had like yoga happening at her center. And I was like, I'm going to go to all these yoga sessions, okay? Because I needed to be in space where I felt like I wasn't so much of a unicorn. But when I saw her, and I felt like she would understand me because of how authentic she was showing up in her life. And so I went to yoga a couple times and stayed later and utilized that as an opportunity to deeply connect. And from that moment forward, I was telling her, ranting about how I really wanted to love the people that I served, and that I felt like it was taboo to hold space for healing as a therapist, as a clinic, as a social worker, because what this institutions were teaching me is that that wasn't the case. I also felt that things needed to be blacker. Okay, that I needed to be able to be black everywhere I was. And when I shared these insights with Sabrina at the time, she really sat with me and she affirmed me. She was like, "It's okay to love your people. It's okay to be, oh, your dreams, they're valid. You don't want to work over there, it's cool." And she opened doors for me. She spoke my name in places that I wasn't. She imagined and dreamed about me with and for me. And for me, when I think about when Queen Mother Moore is talking about Mary McLeod Bethune opening an opportunity for her, when she talks about those opportunities to stand on stages, when you really like listen to the intonation in her voice, you can feel like that sort of energetic hug, that kind of love of someone really rooting for you, the person, really investing in you. And so I know it's hard, and so I want to share a journal prompt that I make use of, and, just show you, what I do as I'm taking really seriously deep personal reflection, so that I could be open to receiving those kind of connections, so that I could be open to being seen. So, y'all, I don't really play when it comes to journaling. Like, I invest, okay? And so for those that are watching, you see that I have a whole bag of colorful markers, okay? Because we don't play about this, okay? Because if I want to doodle, y'all gonna let me doodle, all right? So when I am creating intentional space for myself, I really create an environment that almost taps into the childlike aspect of myself. So I'm not about to pull out the crayons, okay? Because it's really hard to write and find small lines with crayons, but I do invest in smell good adult, those fine Sharpie or Papermate markers. And then I also really invest in beautiful journals, right? I want them to be bound, okay? I want fly Black women to be on the front. And I really take the time to create an ambiance for myself. So yes, you see my candles, and yes, I might get a little sip of tea. And so what I want to have y'all know is the journal prompt that I found really helped me in opening my heart space to be able to receive the kind of support and healing from the concepts and notions of imposter syndrome is really identifying the folks that genuinely loved me for me. And so the journal prompt that I invite you to engage with me around is: who really sees you and paves a way for you right now, right? That's the first question. Who really sees you and paves the way for you right now? And then after you do that, because the answer could be wide ranging, okay? Because at the time when I asked myself who really sees me and paves the way for me right now, I didn't have many people that I could write down, right? But then when I expanded my reflection into what kind of energy, what kind of collaboration, what kind of mentorship or support am I inviting into my life, when I wrote that down, many of the characteristics of what I started to see around me expanded. I was able to identify, oh, Sabrina is a person that, I think has the vibration and energy that might be able to see me. And so I placed myself in those spaces. But in order for me to get to that insight, I had to journal about it. And I had to be really honest about what comes up for me emotionally, about, my experiences of not being seen as a child and how that translates into the ways that I abandon myself as an adult. And so I encourage you to take the time, make it special however you want. Maybe it's not a whole collection of pastel color markers. Maybe it's pens. Maybe it's stickers. I have those too. Or maybe you're not writing at all. Maybe you're doing an auto recording, an audio journal of yourself as you're expressing. But really create the space to be with yourself. I want to invite all of us to be able to be more intentional about creating environments around ourselves that allow us to hold fast to our vision. And, follow us, give us a like, and find us wherever you listen to podcasts. See you in the next episode.